a database that came from the Israeli military that suggests that at least 83% of the people killed by the IDF in Gaza were civilians. This is the Israeli intelligence own accounts. That's what's been going on in Gaza, conducted by the world's most moral army.
So recently, Glenn Greenwald exposed the lies of Israel in talking about civilian casualties in Gaza and how Israel has been lying about the proportion of the people in Gaza that have died that are civilians. This, according to a recent database that indicates and contradicts that the civilian casualties in Gaza are far greater than Israeli politicians, including Netanyahu, have claimed. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Benjamin Netanyahu has been making the rounds by doing interviews with podcast hosts who he knows are extremely pro-Israel or just too ignorant to ask him any meaningful questions or push back on him, as is the case of the Nelk boys. He sat down with Trigonometry and Konstantin Kizin and Francis Foster, both of whom are fanatically pro-Israel. And one of the claims that Netanyahu made was that they have a kill rate of a civilian combatant ratio of 1-to-1. For every civilian who's killed, that means that they have killed one terrorist or one militant, which is considered not a great ratio, but an acceptable ratio in war. This is the claim that Netanyahu made, and it was released just this morning.
We do. We call up the Palestinian civilians and we say, leave the area. Millions of text messages, millions of individual phone calls. Please get out. And Hamas stands there and tries to prevent them by shooting them, killing them. So what do you think? Is that genocide? No, it isn't. You know it isn't. And yet Israel is being blamed. And of course, the ratio of combatants to non-combatants killed is about 1.5 to 1, which is probably, I think every civilian death is a tragedy. We do everything we can, as no army has done in history in such dense urban warfare, to prevent it.
No.
Just the lies are out of control. And yeah, they tell people to move, but where? In Gaza, you've constrained where they can even go by limiting the aid facilities from 400 to 4, 2 of which are, even there and in operation in a given day for 15 minutes a day, and you've closed the borders into Green Line Israel. It's not like they can go a large stretch. This is a very small place, and you're consummating a genocide. And no, this isn't well within the parameters of war, as will indicate. You can see he said a 1-to-1 ratio of civilians to Hamas. Well, let's see what the data indicates.
Army in the world. It is amazing. This is a very common claim in American discourse. The IDF is the most moral army in the world that goes out of its way more than anyone to avoid civilian death. It's kind of amazing because it is quite an insult to the American military. It's basically saying, yeah, the American military is pretty reckless. They go around killing civilians. They're not a very moral army. The Israeli army, however, they're the most moral army in the world. And you'll hear Americans saying that about this foreign army.
Yeah, that is ironic that he says that in English to a lot of Americans, not in this case, but he has his speeches in English talking about how moral and how great of a moral compass Israel has in fighting this war. He calls it a war. It's actually an ethnic cleansing campaign. It's a starvation campaign. It's a genocide. But they're so boastful about this. It's so brazen. And the disconnect from reality is so glaring that more and more people are seeing through this nonsense.
And it's a joke. It's an absolute joke that the IDF is even close to that. You could almost make the case at this point, as we're about to show you, that they're the most immoral army, that they have the least amount of concern for civilian death because they don't actually consider the people of Gaza to be civilians. They consider them animals, subhumans, their lives having no real value. We just showed you the statements from this U.S. attorney for Nevada who leans into her Israeliness, even though she's an American citizen, now American official, who says that there's no such thing as an innocent person in Gaza. This is a common theme. We've heard this from so many people.
Yeah, Brian Mast, the U.S. congressman, said that there's no such thing as an Palestinian. That's what basically red pilled Candace Owens on Israel, by the way. As it turns out, you had people like Randy Fine saying that he sleeps soundly knowing that there are dead Palestinian babies in rubble, responding to someone on Twitter to that regard. This is a routine thing amongst the most diligent and zealous Zionists in the United States. We hear it time and time again, but the proof is in the pudding, and we see how immoral and how genocidal this force is, certainly the IDF is, in consummating this genocide.
So do you think with that level of dehumanization and contempt for the people of Gaza, that they're not innocent, they're not even human, they're animals, they're subhuman, that there's any care taken whatsoever to avoid slaughtering them? Obviously, the answer is no. Unfortunately for Netanyahu, he made this claim a day before 972 magazine, which is an Israeli magazine, obtained and then shared with The Guardian a database that came from the Israeli military that suggests that at least 83% of the people killed by the IDF in Gaza were civilians.
Bad timing for Netanyahu on that one.
Obviously very far from the 1-to-1 ratio or 1.5-to-1 ratio that Netanyahu baselessly claimed yesterday, that of all the people killed in Gaza, according to the Israeli army's own database, at least 83% are innocent people, are civilians. That's a hideous, horrific war crime ratio.
Are they going to tell the owners of this Israeli database that they're anti-Semitic, by the way? Is that going to come? Are they going to be called Jew haters? Are they going to be called funded by Qatar? That even this Israeli army database is funded by Qatar somehow? You can just predict all the nonsense that's going to come from this. But this is notable. This isn't, what they'll call a conspiracy theory site. This is an Israeli intelligence database, totally contradicting what Netanyahu just said there.
Here's what 972 reported, quote, data from an internal Israeli intelligence database indicates that at least 83% of Palestinians killed in Israel's onslaught on Gaza were civilians, an investigation by 972 magazine, Local, and The Guardian can reveal. Figures obtained from the classified database, which record the death of militants from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, contradict by a huge margin the public statement of Israeli army and government officials throughout the war, which have generally claimed a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio of civilian to militant casualties. Instead, the classified data backs up the findings of several studies suggesting Israel's bombardment of Gaza has killed civilians at a rate with few parallels in modern warfare.
Think about that. That's Israeli intelligence unveiling this. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not even a 2-to-1 ratio. It's closer to a 3-to-1 ratio that has more civilian deaths than militant deaths. And this is Israeli intelligence, and few parallels in history, despite the fact that they're out there saying, hey, this is the moral warriors. This is the moral campaign. This is the moral war. We have a greater moral compass than any other fighting force in the world. You just saw Netanyahu lying through his teeth about that.
The world's most moral army, killing civilians, quote, at a rate with few parallels in modern warfare. The Israeli army confirmed the existence of the database, which is managed by the Military Intelligence Directorate. Multiple intelligence sources familiar with the database said the Army views it as the only authoritative tally of militant casualty figures. In the words of one of them, quote, "There's no other place to check." The database includes a list of 47,653 names of Palestinians in Gaza whom this unit considers to be active in the military wings of Hamas and PIJ. According to the sources, the list is based on the group's own internal documents acquired by the Army. The database designates 34,973 of those names as operatives of Hamas and 12,700 as operatives of Islamic Jihad. According to the data, which was obtained in May of this year, the Israeli army believed it has killed around 8,900 operatives since October 7th. the death of 700,330 of whom were considered certain, and 1,570 recorded as probably dead. Assuming that all of the certain probable militant deaths were counted in the death toll, that would mean over 83% of Gaza's dead were civilians. If the probable deaths are discounted and only the certain deaths included, the proportion of civilian death rises to more than 86%.
And note that this is only under the assumption that Israel has killed only 62,000 people. When most estimates outside of Israel's own estimates, which they are generally incentivized to diminish, by the way, are north of 100,000. And there's a lot of people that are not included in those stats that are missing and probably should be presumed dead. But this is only going off 62,000 dead. So the percentage of civilians killed is likely much higher than even that 83 or 86%.
And there you see the graphic provided or created by the Israeli intelligence database. This is not NGOs or outside groups. This is or any agency in Gaza. This is the Israeli intelligence own accounts. And there you see at the top, Palestinian civilians and militants killed by the Israeli army in Gaza between October 23rd and May 2025. And the red here is civilian deaths, and the black is militant death, so you can see it.
Again, this is Israel's own data, a database. Israeli military intelligence is showing that at least at the lowest, 83% of the people they've killed in Gaza were civilians, despite walking around as they're the moral crusaders in this whole thing. And it's only Hamas that's stopping them, right? It's only Hamas. If Hamas gives up their hostages tomorrow, this whole war will end. Even though Hamas has always been willing to give hostages in an exchange with Israel, who, by the way, has about 3,500 hostages of Palestinian origin. And they're being held with secret charges, not even charged with crimes, by the way. They're hostages too. Of course, you don't hear that term, in the media, but they are hostages. Hamas has always been willing to negotiate on this. Netanyahu, agreed to a brief ceasefire that he always intended to break. Trump allowed him to break it, even though Trump himself orchestrated that ceasefire. And exchanges did occur. They were willing to continue the exchanges, but Netanyahu broke it. And now you see why. They want to kill the civilians. They don't even beat around the bush on it a lot of the time. Smotrich has talked about it. Katz has talked about it. Ben-Gvir has talked about it. Ben-Gvir said no aid can flow into Gaza for our policy. That's been contradicted at times by various officials, but sometimes they do drop the mask and admit it.
So it's expressed here, an infinitesimal number of the people killed in Gaza by the IDF are militants, but overwhelming majority, obviously nowhere near a 1-to-1 ratio claimed by Netanyahu. And here's a pie chart illustrating the same data where you can see how big the red is, which is the deaths of civilians, and the black is representative of the number of militants who are killed. That's what's been going on in Gaza, conducted by the world's most moral army.
Yeah, he said it, and I hope people are opening their eyes to it. And look, I get it. The legacy media is not going to cover this story. They're not covering it now. But thankfully, heroic actual journalists like Glenn Greenwald are covering this. And I can't be more emphatic about pointing to the fact that this is Israeli intelligence. This is what they're saying about civilian casualties. It's not, numbers produced by the UN or another globalist entity or a conspiracy theory site. This is Israel's own government, despite the fact that their government are headed by supervillains that say they're the most moral army. They have a 1-to-1 civilian to militant ratio. No, they don't. It's a complete mockery to our senses and our sensibilities and our logic to claim that now when this is out. But guess what? Even though this is out and this story is getting some coverage on the independent media, which thankfully exists now, they're still going to deny it. They're still going to go back to the 1-to-1 ratio because that's all they ever do. They lie. And lying is part of the propaganda to support this crusade, this quest to expand Israel's borders into Syria and Lebanon and Sinai and parts of Iraq under the Greater Israel Project, and finish off the Palestinians in this genocide in Gaza, establish the concentration zone that Katz calls a humanitarian city in the ruins where Rafah once stood. Even Ehud Olmert, the former Prime Minister of Israel, has called that a concentration camp because that's exactly what they intend to use it for. If their starvation campaign doesn't work in just completely annihilating everyone, as well as the occupation doesn't work. So that's what we got on our hands. It's literal blood on our hands, and it's duplicity, it's evil, and it's absurd that the U.S. bankrolls this and that our government doesn't use any of its leverage and all the billions of dollars that it gives to Israel to get this nonsense to stop. But what would the America First solution be? It's not the Israel First solution. It's to get our troops away from there, stop all aid to Israel, close down all foreign Middle East bases that house U.S. forces, bring them home, stop getting into these stupid entangling alliances over Israel and whatever it wants the U.S. to do. Because this relationship is skewed in one direction, and it's not skewed in the direction of the country that's bankrolling and financing all this madness. No. It's skewed in the direction of a war criminal, Netanyahu, who should go down for war crimes in addition to his corruption and fraud charges against him. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Are you surprised about these statistics? How much coverage is this going to get? Is Israel going to continue to double down and say this is lies? Are they going to call this Qatari-funded, nonsense? Are they going to call this owner of this Israeli database an anti-Semite? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Glenn. Thank you, Glenn, for this story. This was awesome. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, which I will tip my hat to you for if you go to that length. And as a return favor for that, I'll give you access to all of my members-only videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.